Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon, and I'll be serving as the host of the podcast. Today, I have as my guest Brian Harrison, class of 1996. So great to see you again, Brian.
Buzz, it's great to see you as well. I can't even believe you just said that. 1996? 1996. How is that possible?
25 years ago.
I just found this. I was showing you before we started. So I don't know what I was doing there. I don't know what I was trying to do with, I don't know, some kind of Brandon Lee Crow thing. I don't know.
That's a 90s look, though. That was a 90s look.
That is. Oh, my God. That kid was a punk. Okay.
So, Brian, before we get into memories from WIU, let's update everyone where you are today and how things are going. So tell us a little bit about where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in Charlotte, North Carolina. I live about a half hour outside of Charlotte in a great town called Indian Trail. We moved here around last Memorial Day. And I work for a company called Truist. Truist is the merger of two banks, SunTrust and BB&T, both predominantly Southern banks, but their merger, which happened officially about 13 months ago, created the sixth largest commercial bank in the United States. And so you might be thinking the exact same question that I get asked a lot. Okay, this is all really interesting, Brian, but what does any of this have to do with broadcasting? What does it have to do with media, multimedia, any of that? And the truth is, just like any company, just like any corporation, any small business, they have a story to tell. There is a story that Truist is telling in terms of what it does in our communities. There's a specific purpose that Truist has, which is to inspire and build better lives in communities. And so a lot of what my job is, I say this all the time. I've told our chairman and CEO, Kelly King, this. I have the best job in the company out of 60,000 people because I get to be a storyteller. And it's a part of this field that I didn't even know existed when I was with you at Western. And I don't think any of us really thought of it in that way. You think about TV and you think of radio and you think of, I want to be a filmmaker and the digital revolution hadn't happened yet. Things hadn't become streamlined as in terms of the internet. There was no internet at the time. And so it was a very different world back then. But long story short, to answer your question, yeah, I work for Truist and love it. Nice. Most comfortable mask I have. I'm not drinking a Kool-Aid here, but this is a really comfortable mask.
One of the things I talk to students about in our major, whenever I can, is that being able to tell somebody else's story is going to be so essential in any aspect of the media as they move forward. And it sounds like over the career that you've had after you left WIU, you learned how to tell somebody else's story.
I did. And it's something that I've always been fascinated with. I've always been fascinated with the media arts, all the way back to delivering pizzas in high school in Downers Grove. I would listen to music and I would come up with stories in my head based on everything that I was seeing around me. And I was always captivated by the combination of that, growing up as a kid of the MTV generation, and also just loving the idea of the simplicity and the profound nature of a human interest story. They can make you laugh, they can make you cry, they can be fiction, they can be nonfiction. And I found my way into doing what I'm doing now through a very, some would say, convoluted, crazy, insane story that actually got me to this place. But the beautiful thing about it was it took me down a road in our field that not many people go down. A lot of times, as you know, you get into radio, you stay in radio. Like that's your love, that's your passion. You get into broadcasting, you become a news anchor, you become an editor or a journalist. That's kind of what you do. I was a little crazy. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I left and graduated in '96 and moved to Chicago. And it's something I always wanted to do, was live in the city. And so I got this little apartment with my sister up on the north side, like a mile from Wrigley Field. And I was incredibly unsuccessful in broadcasting. I literally, and the ironic thing was, I got up there and I thought I was going to have it made, because the summer before my senior year, I did an internship at 105.9 WCKG, and it's the biggest classic rock station in Chicago. I listened to it growing up. I met all the DJs that I loved growing up, and I thought, oh, this is going to pave my way. Like I'm going to be fine. Not so much. And I spent several years. I was also confused because I had my junior year caught the acting bug, and so I was acting. I was doing small parts, industrials, commercials, that kind of stuff. I was part of a theater company with a bunch of Western alum, but I was bartending and I was waiting tables and doing what all of us were doing, starving in Chicago. And I was secretly frustrated because I thought I didn't realize that this was at all part of my path. I thought, you know what, I'm going to pursue an acting career, but I've got broadcasting. That's what I want to do. And I didn't find my way back into that field for about 4 years. I spent from more or less May of '96 until, well into 2000 before I actually got a job in anywhere near the broadcasting arts.
You know, when I read over your life's journey, I thought I was looking at another version of the Forrest Gump movie in terms of things that are happening along your way that are just like, wow, that's so fascinating to hear what happens as you go down this route. And one of the first things that happens to get you back into sort of this field is that you join the Blue Man Group.
I did. I was not a performer. I was
Right.
I was on the production side. But I did. I actually had a very, very, very good friend. He's the best man at my wedding, actually. We're still friends to this day. He went to Western, and he was part of their theater program. His name's Tom Galassi. And his nickname has been Boomer for his whole life. That's what we all call him. But he was a performer, moved to Chicago. He and I moved in together and got a place at Addison and Western. And I would go and bartend. He would go and do the show, and then he would come to the bar, and we would all hang out. And we just happened to be hanging out one day, and we were going to go do some biking up at the lake, and we stopped by the theater, and I saw on the board that they were looking for a video engineer, a part-time video engineer. And I thought, well, I don't know what that means here, but I think I can do that. And I love this show. And so I want to do it. And I don't have a resume except for bartending now. So I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens. And I got the job. I was more nervous than I could ever have imagined I would be, because I wanted it so bad. And so just a note for all you students out there, you're going to have nerves. Don't worry about it. Just fly in the face of them, go in and do it. But I got the job somehow. And I started off as a part-time video engineer, which means I was backstage, just off stage. And I was responsible for being on headset and basically executing all of the video cues in the show. There are a couple of big projectors out there and a lot of sequences that happen that are reliant upon video and voiceover. And so I would be responsible for that. And at first, it was one of the most terrifying things I'd ever done. And as I got in, I fell completely in love with it. And I remembered back to being in high school, to falling in love with live event video design, especially things that bands like Pink Floyd were doing. I loved how they used video to help tell the story that was happening on stage through the music. And I felt a kinship to that through this show. And So I fell in love with it. A year later, I took over as a full-time video engineer, and I was with Blue Man for about 10 years, and that was the beginning of a pretty crazy ride.
And during all this time, as technology continues to change,
Mhm.
you're having to learn a lot of this stuff on your own, aren't you?
So I now understand what it was like for our grandparents to, look back and say, in my day,
Yeah.
we didn't have a telephone and we didn't have electricity and, we didn't have running water. That's what it was like for us. And in 1996, we were right at the end of the generation that came in right before the digital revolution happened. And so my first year at Blue Man, I'm living in Chicago, and I'll never forget the moment. And everybody just, buckle down and understand that at some point you might have to have this conversation with your wife or your husband or your partner. Um, I was getting restless with Blue Man, and I knew that there was this whole thing beginning to happen. Um, Boomer was making more money than me, and he had bought one of the very first Apple computers that had Final Cut Pro. And what I was seeing him do on this computer blew me away, because I used to deliver pizzas when I was 17 years old and thinking, I wonder how you do that thing like a crossfade.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And that must cost like $100,000. And now you could do it in your living room. And I thought, I need to do this. And I'll never forget standing in the hallway in our apartment talking to my wife, Kim, also a WIU alum, who I said, I need to go and learn, teach myself everything that I missed out on in this little window, where everything that, we learn the principles of everything in college, but now a lot of the technology is obsolete. Just like kids that are graduating this year, they're going to need to keep up on things because in a few years, that always changes, right? So I said, I need to go into debt, and I need to max out some credit cards, and I need to buy a computer, and I need to learn how to do this. I need to learn how to edit and make movies. And so I did. It was a Gateway computer, if you remember Gateway
Oh,
computers.
yeah.
And
Cows.
this is the very first edit software. It doesn't even exist anymore. But this is what I used to teach myself how to edit. This was the software. And I started to just kind of challenge myself every day. I said, over a cup of coffee every morning, I'm going to teach myself something new. I'm going to learn what I need to learn to do what I want to do, which was at the time, and I didn't even understand exactly what I was wanting to do, but I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to impact people's lives through the stories that I would tell, and change them. And so that was sort of the beginning. It was a long road. It took a couple of years, but ultimately I was able to do it. I switched over to Mac, and there's a whole parallel path that was happening here, where I was working at Blue Man and beginning to do some pretty crazy things I never imagined myself doing in my life. Meanwhile, the internet had happened, which threw us all for a loop, right? We saw it begin to happen in the late 90s, and then late 90s into the early 2000s, I'm around 29, and I think, you know what? I just got high-speed internet, which costs like $40 a month, which seemed like all the money in the world. And I thought, I'm able to do things I've never been able to do before. I want to make a documentary. And I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to figure it out. And so I went to Best Buy and I bought this camera for $900. It's a Digital 8 camera with a FireWire connection, because I knew my computer had FireWire and I could take the information from here, the standard def content, and get it into the computer and then edit it. And ultimately what I did was I made a documentary that was on a camera from Best Buy. And the end of the story is, several years later, I finally finish it, and it ended up in Best Buy. So it was kind of a nice little full circle thing of finishing this documentary. It was on Netflix when Netflix was DVDs. And it was here, actually, this is it here. This is just about the only copy I still have, but it's a story of this show that I watched when I was 10 years old. And, it's kind of rise and fall story related to the old days of pro wrestling, and inspiring, but some bad things happen as well. And kind of like the Mickey Rourke film called The Wrestler.
The Wrestler, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, this was all based out of something that I was feeling as I left college, which was I started to understand that over time, no matter what you're doing, even if like me, I got to Blue Man and I thought I was in heaven. I thought I've arrived, this is it. This is where I want to be. And I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Well, you get restless. Everybody gets restless. You begin to understand that life is only a matter of arrivals and departures. That's exactly what life is. And you find yourself feeling for a moment like you've arrived, but then you start to understand that, well, you know what? Maybe I haven't. I want to do this. I want to do this. And you just keep setting the bar higher. That's what this was all about. It was about doing the show and loving working with Blue Man, but I had to have something for myself, and I wanted to learn. I wanted to continue to get better and grow, and sort of develop this side of myself that I knew wasn't there yet, but I knew I could if I could just catch up to the technology and become a storyteller. And so that's what I did.
And not only that, you have some opportunities to work on some production teams that are doing some outstanding work, right, Brian? And also, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, so you also had some appearances on the Tonight Show. You had something connected to that. I want to ask you about some of that.
Yeah, Blue Man ended up really becoming something I didn't expect. To say the least. I wasn't prepared for it at the time. It never happens when you're prepared for it. You fake it till you make it, for the most part. I mean, you get yourself into it, and then you figure out how to get yourself through it and out of it and be successful at it. I did some work along with Boomer that got some attention of the parent company, Blue Man Productions in New York. I was sort of sending the head video designer and my mentor in New York. I would send him ideas every few weeks and just say, what if I did this in the show? What if we tried this? What if I did this? And he would just come back and say, talk to so-and-so and, make sure that they're cool with it. But yeah, absolutely. And, I think he appreciated that contact and knowing that I cared and knowing that, I was invested in this show, because they ended up coming back to me and wanting me to be a part of what was their first national tour. It was called The Complex in 2003. And it was basically a touring Blue Man show that started over the summer, and it was supposed to be sort of a parody, but not funny, right? Like there are a couple funny moments in it, but it was their take on a summer rock tour. And so we had a couple singers. Tracy Bonham was one of the vocalists that toured with us. And along the way, and a quick side note, going back to kind of the whole Pink Floyd narrative from high school, the production designer that they hired was Mark Brickman, who was the designer behind The Wall and a lot of the work that Pink Floyd had done in their concerts. And so we all got to work with Mark and learn from him. And so that from a design standpoint, completely blew me away. But long story short, this tour went out and we ended up doing the Tonight Show. We did it a couple times on the tour, and then over the next few years, I had moved to Vegas, and we did the Tonight Show a couple more times. And so I would go out and be a part of that. So that was one of those moments that you just think, what am I doing here? How did I get here all of a sudden from bartending? So.
Yeah, and that's, what I want hopefully our students to understand, because at some point in time you were a 19-year-old
Mhm.
college student.
Yeah.
And what do you remember about WIU? Obviously, you met your wife. That was a great thing that happened. It's a Macomb connection. What other things do you remember about the
Um,
campus? Or
oh my gosh, I remember everything. I remember the first time I drove down with my girlfriend at the time, and we were both going to go to Western, and we did ultimately, but we went to the University Union and we ate Hardee's, and I remember sitting there and reading the newspaper and realizing that Kurt Cobain had died. That was how I found out. I found out the next day, and
wow,
I'll never forget just kind of taking in the campus. I came down and I was a junior when I came down. I had gotten my associates, and then I transferred down as a junior. I lived at Tanner, and then lived in off-campus housing, and was part of Theta Chi for a couple of years, and had an apartment. And I remember just feeling at home down there. I still think to this day. I mean, Macomb has a very special place in my heart.
good.
I want to take my daughter back there at some point. My daughter is 14, and in our vestibule in here, there's a kind of a picture of her and a couple of inspirational things on the wall. And there's a picture, and the picture is from outside of the cafe, a bar that may still be there. I'm not sure, but it was on the town square,
Yeah.
and that's where it's not where I met my wife, but it's where I ran into her after having seen her the year before, and we went inside and she was with a friend, and we sat down and stayed till 2 in the morning or whatever, and rest is history. So um, I I can't tell you, gosh, all the things about Macomb. One quick story. Um, I found a cassette tape recently from when I would DJ along with a friend, Scott Bradfield, who I'm not sure if you remember Scott, but
Yeah.
Scott was with me, and we did WAXS, which was the radio station that would play in dorm rooms on the TV.
Yeah.
And I found this cassette tape of my show, and I thought this was just the coolest thing ever. I loved doing that. I loved having that little space for this period of time, being able to play music to probably the two people that were listening in a dorm room, at a given time. But I loved it. And I learned so much about, obviously the technology and all that kind of stuff, but you find a little something out about yourself when you first sit in front of that microphone, and you start to really kind of have those experiences of what it's like to be a college student and have a show like that, and have this experience the first time you're away from home. And that was a big part of it for me. That was a really big part of it.
Well, you had such not only you got started off in your own direction, but you grew along the way into where you currently are. But if you could say a few things to a current student or to a current Brian, that, go back in time and say, hey, here's
Yeah.
what you ought to do. What kind of, and of course, things have changed dramatically since you were at that period of time. But what kind of
Mhm.
recommendations do you have for our students?
Oh my gosh. The big thing that I would say is, it's hard for me to relate. I have nephews and nieces, and family members, and other people that I know that are going through this right now. I can't imagine what it's like to be going through college right now while going through a pandemic. Um, so with that brings about a whole other level um, of struggle. And so I say this being sensitive to that. Um, just try and take it easy on yourself. You know, just try and trust that what you're doing is everything that you can be doing. You have to remember that um, things aren't going to happen on your timetable. They're going to happen on their own timetable. If you're a person of faith, they happen on God's timetable, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't force that. Just hang on to both sides of the canoe and just go. Don't try and turn it around. I went through, I when I got to Chicago, I ate bologna for a summer. I mean, that's all I did. That's all I could afford. I folded jeans as a temp job, and then I finally got a job as a host at Goose Island Beer Company, and then became a server, then became a bartender, then got to Blue Man, then did all this crazy stuff. But in the back of my mind, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that it was out there somewhere. And no, I would be lying if I said every single day I had that in the forefront, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't get down on myself sometimes. But you have to have faith. You have to have faith that you're gonna get there. And the things that I would impart on every single student listening to this right now is that what you learn in school will give you the tools to get to the next step. But what's actually going to get you there is who you are.
Yep.
And the type of person that people look at you as. Do they want to work with you? Are you easy to work with? Do you come to work and give excuses? Do you, not accept that something was your fault? The three hardest words to say are, it's on me. It was on me. It was my fault. You have to get comfortable with those three words, because they will allow people to see that you're human just like everybody else, but you're accountable. It will help you to grow respect and a reputation for someone that can be relied upon. Being reliable doesn't mean that you're perfect. Being reliable means that you're accountable and that you are someone that other people can trust. And then when you get to that point, that's when really great things start to happen. You become that person that people want to work with, that they want to bring in on projects that are really important to them. One of the things that I do now is I'm kind of the technical producer in our studio to put our chairman and CEO Kelly King on CNBC a couple times a year. That's something that's kind of a big deal for me, and it's kind of a big job. And they don't just give that job to anybody. Like, you have to earn your way into that, and I had to earn my way into it. And now I'm in a place where the head of corporate communications, he knows that he can trust me to do that job. So it's there. I wish the podcast was longer, because there are so many things I think that you and I could both agree, Buzz. It's you think back on life and you think, God, I wish that this was taught in school, or I wish that this was taught in school. And it's they aren't things that you can necessarily teach. It's all about wisdom and experience. And so the best thing that you could do is bring in guys that are now old like us, and kind of look back and say, men or women, and say, here's what my path was.
Yeah.
And if I could do it, you can do it. I have absolutely no doubt that anybody listening right now, if I could somehow find my way to this incredible job that I have now, it's almost, to me, it almost feels like the movie This Is Spinal Tap in a way, because I look back and I think there are so many people who were probably more qualified than me to have the position that I have, but maybe I had the right balance of all the qualifications, whereas maybe they didn't. And so, that's what you have to find. You have to find that holistic balance, where it's not only what you know, but it's what you do with it. And it's how people feel about you, and if they want to work with you. I was saying before we jumped on, Buzz, I was so happy to see this podcast was happening, and that you were running it, because you are one of the select few people that I remember that really had an impact on me at Western. And so, that speaks to you and your leadership, and to you as an educator, that you connect with us as students like this. And so my hat's off to you.
Well, thank you, Brian. And part of the real rationale for this podcast is to point our students and in your direction, and to say, he was just like you here.
Yeah.
He was here, and now this is something that you might want to look into doing and consider doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just also say, I wasn't the best student. I really wasn't. I until I found my passion, which I had a passion for broadcasting. I also, when I was there, I was part of the theater program my last year or so, loved that. But if you put me in a traditional school setting, I brag about my daughter now because she has a 4.2 GPA and she's an honor student and all that. She got that from Kim. It didn't come from me.
Yeah.
So, it's all about finding what your passion is and what your purpose is, and just doing the most with it that you possibly can.
Well, I'm so happy to catch up with you and see that you're doing well, and to hear your voice and to talk with you, Brian.
You as well, Buzz. Thank you so much. And feel free to give my contact info to any of your students if they want to chat more. If they want to know what it's like to live down the street from Wrigley Field.
Well, hopefully it won't be 25 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Between talking with you again.
Absolutely. If I ever get back down to Macomb, I'll definitely look you up.
Please do. Please do.
All right. Excellent.
Okay.
All
Brian,
right.
Thanks again for joining me on this podcast. For those watching, make sure to join me again next week for another conversation with a WIU alum. Until then, stay safe, take care, and God bless.